All right. Okay, it's Kim and me again. Thank you, anybody who has joined us. Not anybody yet, but and I need to get more light on my face.
Yeah, my lighting is like from above, so
Yeah.
I'm just. Oh, hang on, Anthony's. Aw, thanks, Anthony. Anthony just turned on some nice forward light for me.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to turn on this guy. Okay, I'm going to put him over here.
Nice. Nope.
Cover up the turkey neck.
Yeah, I know. I'm always like, I have my vest on, so sometimes I just do it up. And
my mom, being old colony Mennonite, always wears a scarf that's tied in the front.
Oh, okay.
And she had quite a bit of fun with that, actually, because she would joke about that one of the advantages to wearing a headscarf tied in the front is that it always hides your turkey neck. So
yeah, that is a great advantage. I take full advantage of like scarf season in Prince George, which in the north is like more than half the year,
Yes.
So the only time you can get away with not wearing one is like in the summer, but spring, fall, good to go.
But you have no turkey neck yet.
No, I feel like I'm getting there. Like I feel like I'm getting there.
I know, and that's one thing about getting older. Like we spend a lot more time being older than we do being young.
Yeah, it's true. It's interesting though. I was looking back at old photos the other day of Anthony and I when we met, and it's really interesting because I feel like as you kind of get older, you just gain more perspective, obviously. And so I was looking at these old photos, and I remember feeling like very critical of myself, back then. And now it's kind of nice because it's like hindsight 2020. So I feel like, I'm being critical of myself now, but I know in 10 years I'll look back and be like, I didn't look that bad compared to now. Yeah. It's funny how we're always like really critical, but it doesn't really do us any good,
Yeah. Oops. Okay. That's okay there. Oh, that's maybe better. Not quite as bright.
That's nice. That's soft. Okay. I feel like we match a little bit more.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. All right. Yeah. I've got the light on top above my head showing my halo.
That's how I feel. It's that forward. It's like that light from up top. Those like ceiling pot lights are kind of the worst when you're filming something.
I know they
all
really
the shadows.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so I have about, like, I'd say 30 minutes roughly.
Lovely.
So anyway, thank you again once I get all my stuff done, like there's a bunch of updating that I need to do on my website, but I want to put all my podcasts, or the podcasts, I mean, they're put up as podcasts, any of the stuff that I'm on with CFIS. So I want to put them on. So that'll be including the talk that I had today with you and Randy.
Oh, yes. That'll be nice.
Yes. But I haven't done that yet. So anyway, so for those of you that are watching this at some point, we had a great talk today talking about pandemic moms. And I was looking at all the material you had that, a half hour with two people, you just don't have time.
I know. Anthony listened to the podcast too, and he was saying the same thing. He was like, it didn't seem very long. It's half an hour, but between like the breaks and the commercial breaks and stuff, he was like, it seems short.
It does. Like I think it's about 23 minutes depending. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then,
It went by quick.
Yeah. Yeah. It sure did.
It was really nice. It was like a fun discussion. It was really nice. It was, I enjoyed it.
Well, I know, and I can really see why this kind of, I'm not a journalist, but I can see why this kind of conversation and public conversation I can see why it's catching on, because we haven't had that, right? You've grown up with the 5-second sound bites, and I've grown up, when I became an adult, I mean, they were a little bit longer then, but we're getting 5-second sound bites.
Yeah.
And it's miserable. Everybody knows that that's not how you learn stuff, right?
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to kind of have a more lengthy discussion on things and kind of be able to hash things out a little bit more.
Yeah.
It's nice, beneficial.
Yeah. So, if anybody hasn't watched, can you give me an idea of, if you want to just briefly introduce yourself?
Well, me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because that way you can determine how much you say. because then I'm not,
Sure. Yes. Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. So my name is Kim. I'm 31 years old. I just had a baby this past year. He's almost exactly one, almost. So that's been an interesting experience, and that's taken up pretty much my entire year, just like learning to be a mother because he's my first one,
yeah.
and going through that experience. And yeah, it's been good. It's been interesting doing it during the pandemic,
Mhm.
which is what we talked about earlier today. So yes,
Yeah. 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 And I like some of the stuff that Randy talked about, and because of her past work with marginalized moms,
yeah,
especially. And I
yeah,
and I and I remember at the very beginning, Dr. Bonnie Henry talked about the fact that she did not want to do restrictions or mandates or anything like that because it would be the hardest on marginalized people. And I'm
hmm,
sure neither you nor I consider ourselves marginalized,
hmm,
but young moms are vulnerable, right?
yeah, for sure.
Because because it's already such a hard time, and adjusting to having a new baby is hard even when everything is good. And
Yeah.
so you had some stats there about that you shared on the radio show, but if you wouldn't mind, just as a starting point, to share those stats.
Yeah. I guess kind of first I can focus on like anxiety and depression. So usually, anxiety and depression in new moms hovers around like 10 to 25%. That's the percentage that it affects. But then I was looking up a study. I just have it in front of me because I was kind of like briefly looking this up last night. If I can
Okay,
figure
and
out.
just while you're looking that up, if
Yeah.
any of our listeners, if you want to post, make a comment, and I'll see if it's on, if it comes up here. I think it should, because we've sort of been able to figure that out. So,
Yeah.
and yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I'm just gonna correct myself. So this is for pregnant individuals. So I also went through the pandemic pregnant, which was an interesting experience because I don't know if people out there know or not, but the rules with the pandemic are they've obviously changed things and how things operate. So like my husband wasn't allowed to come to any appointments with me at all. He wasn't allowed to attend any ultrasounds. So we ended up kind of paying. We paid for a private ultrasound, which again, like I'm a really like we're pretty privileged.
yeah,
Like we are able to do things like that and we're able to afford things like that. Not a lot of people, are
no,
and have the finances to do that. So we were really lucky in that aspect. And really all the way through the pregnancy, we were lucky to be able to access certain resources that other people wouldn't be able to.
yeah.
And we never took that for granted.
And
Um,
just before you go on,
yeah.
for people that are even slightly marginalized, they won't even, like, it's hard enough for them just to do the basics. But if
Yeah.
then they have to also do extra steps, because I know that there were some things that were initiated to help out those people, but that's
Mhm.
another step.
Yeah.
Anytime, even on those of us that have a lot of support and the financial means to access some of these things, even if they're free, it's still an extra step, right?
Yeah, and I think when you're going through, like, such an isolating time and, if you're having anxiety or if you're depressed and you're kinda secluding yourself as well, I mean, it's so much harder, right? Um, but yeah, so just to correct myself, like this is for anxiety and depression in pregnant women. So usually hovers around 10 to 25%. But in this study, it said 37% of women reported clinically relevant symptoms of depression. So that went up a lot. And then 57% reported symptoms of anxiety. So this is just the change from like prior pandemic to now. And I think that really has to do with a lot of like the new kind of mandates put in place.
Mhm.
There's a lot of anxiety around like having a baby. What is having a baby going to look like? When I had my baby, I was only allowed like one support person. You can't have your family at the hospital with you. You were allowed like one person and your doula and your midwife. So I didn't have a doula. We didn't do that. So it was just me and my husband. And then of course, the
But
concerns
then,
about
but
after.
then, yes, but then if he had got COVID,
Right. If he had even had a cold, he wouldn't have been allowed to come. If he had had any symptoms at all, he wouldn't have been allowed to come. So then I would have been allowed to have one other support person. But yeah, if he had had any symptoms at all, he wasn't allowed to come. So we ended up isolating like a week before giving birth. Like he just went to work and came home. That's all he did. And I just stayed home. Well, it didn't really matter for me because if I were to have given him something, I could still go in if I were COVID positive and give
yes,
birth.
yes.
They wouldn't be able to turn me away for that. But if I had given him anything, even a cold, like he wouldn't have been able to come. So I stayed home for like 2 weeks prior, a week or two prior.
So I mean, that's even with no issues, anything at all, that would
Yeah.
already cause you stress because you knew that people around you were getting COVID.
Yeah, and when, this was a year ago too, so we didn't have like rapid testing options, like widely available. I think the vaccine had just come out in January, so there wasn't a lot, of
No.
people getting vaccinated at that point because I think that they were doing it by age group first,
Yes.
and our
Yes.
our age group was further down the line because we were
Yeah.
less at risk, right? So yeah, it was an interesting experience.
Wow.
It was
Okay.
isolating, like you don't have your family there, even after you give birth. Like our family didn't even see him like our baby in person and for like a month. Like like they didn't come in the house. They did come for window visits, but they didn't come in the house because
Yeah.
COVID was so new and we didn't have the information that we do now. And it was scary.
Oh, wow. Okay, you've got some other stats there that
Yeah.
you wanted to share. So you just lead the way there on that.
Sure. So, I guess, yeah. So now I feel like we have more information now. I'm sorry, my computer's knocked that. We have more information now regarding COVID, right? And we're kind of in a time that's less severe with Omicron. I think Ontario released some statistics saying that people are 81% less likely to end up in ICU or dead, between like both vaccinated and unvaccinated groups. Even hospitalization, just being admitted to the hospital, is like 59% less for unvaccinated and
Yeah, and I think
56%
even
less for
there,
vaccinated.
I think Ontario
So,
actually just released some really encouraging stats, like their hospital admissions are down
oh
and
yeah,
everything.
yeah, everything's kind of on the downward trend. It seemed like they had their peak. I mean, obviously everybody was getting this at one time because of how fast it was spreading, and that overwhelms our hospital systems, right? And so I think that was the main concern. But I think now that everyone's gotten it or has been exposed to it, like Bonnie Henry said, you've either gotten it or you've been exposed to it by now. And
Yeah.
so now that we've gone through that and we've kind of gone through our peak, I personally think that it would be time to start lifting restrictions because we can compare Omicron to many other diseases. Um, so, yeah, but I have some stats. I was really interested. So when I had my baby, and even now, people ask me like, "Oh, are you really concerned about your baby getting COVID? Like it's the worst thing ever, And that made me really afraid to like go outside with my kid and expose him to anybody. And I think that that's a really unhealthy thing to do. I mean, people's choices, they can do what they want. But for me, I didn't want to like have him be really isolated. I thought it was really important for him to see family and to socialize and learn some skills. So I ended up going on to like the government website, Stats Canada, and looking up statistics of like childhood deaths and COVID. And so what I found there, at I was looking at COVID deaths like through the entire pandemic because they are released as like an entire pandemic number. They don't do them by year. So throughout the entire pandemic, 0 to 11 years old, 17 kids have died from COVID, which is tragic. However, influenza, like in 2018, prior to COVID, I feel like this is a decent number to look at because this is when we were functioning normally, and allowing things to go on as normal. So in 2018, in just 1 year alone, the age group for 0 to 9, so lesser age group, 33 children died of influenza. So we kind of have like half the deaths in twice the time. And so for me, that was really shocking because people have been talking about this like it was
Yeah.
the plague,
Yes.
like you should be inside and protecting your child.
Yeah.
And that made me feel like a bad mom if I was going out with my kid, you
Adding
know,
to anxiety.
yeah, going to the grocery store, like, oh, so, judging myself for doing that with my baby, when I had no other option because I was home by myself and, we need food. And so yeah, it was crazy. So I looked at these stats and I was just really shocked at that, and I hear a lot of new moms being very paranoid about COVID with their kids. And
Mhm.
it just seems like, that comforted me to see those statistics. Like it's tragic that these things have happened, and so every death is very tragic. But there is a number that we deem appropriate to function at normal in society.
Mhm.
And yeah, like COVID deaths for babies, just or kids 0 to 11, um, are significantly less than influenza, and we still function normally with that. So
So even because Omicron is a bit more, it's more throat and
nasal,
nasal infection, and I can see that
yeah,
that. So I think that's one thing that kids are getting maybe a little bit sicker on. But I think again,
yeah,
you have to look at the entire picture and go, wait a minute. Even if the number goes up a bit,
hmm,
I mean, you know,
yeah,
you don't want to talk about any kid ever dying as like, oh, it's just a statistic, because they aren't. They are
for sure, for
like
sure,
it's horrible, but
yeah,
statistically speaking, because you have to balance everything out across risks
yeah.
and yeah, and so it does seem that that we shouldn't be unnecessarily worried, and we should probably just do stuff and not be worried
Yeah,
too much about not exposing our kids, because they need that social interaction, right?
yeah, and again, right, it's not like COVID versus nothing. Like it's COVID versus social health, physical health, mental health, right? And so we're kind of putting these mandates in place when at this point in the game, when we're facing like the least severe variant that we've had, um, and we continue putting mandates in place, and we continue putting vaccine mandates in place too, when it's like proven that the transmission rate is the same amongst like vaccinated and unvaccinated, and they're openly saying like this is just to encourage people getting vaccinated. When originally that tool was meant to be used to curb transmission, and now they're just kind of adjusting the tool for it when 90% of the population's already vaccinated. So I don't really understand their goal. And I think that if like it's going to be like pennies, the amount of people now who are going to be getting vaccinated when so many jobs have already been requiring vaccine mandates, and we still have that 10% of the population. I don't think it was reasonable to ever expect that 100% of the population was going to do it.
No,
And
I've been shocked at how many people have gotten vaccinated, because don't we normally have
right,
like 70 to 75%?
yeah, and like that's what they were saying too, right? With when they were first talking about like herd immunity, that's no longer like a conversation, because now they're just like, yeah, it's not like we're just gonna have to live with it. It's here now. And so when they were first talking about herd immunity, it was like 75, 80%, right? And kind of as I feel like as we met these goals,
Yeah.
they just kind of went away. Like we weren't allowed, the goals kept moving and changing and disappearing. And so, yeah, I think we're at a place where the mandates are currently just doing more damage than they are good, because, it's just the vaccine passport isn't doing that job to curb transmission anymore. Um, and there are consequences to the mandates, right? Social health, physical health, mental health,
Yeah.
and we have a lot of like studies on those now, and how significantly higher these percentages are getting.
Yes.
Suicide calls to like suicide hotlines went up 200% between 2019 and 2020. Like in 1 year, jumped 200%,
Yep. And
and that's what's that?
opioid deaths also
Opioid
increased.
just went up like 70%, which is like 20 deaths per day in Canada. And that's mind blowing, right? And we're not even talking about it. Like we're not even focusing on collateral damage, because we're hyper focused on COVID, which isn't a massive threat anymore.
Yeah. Have you looked at any, have you seen, I know that I've seen the comparison, like when you compare life years, like when a
Right.
small
Yeah, I've
child
seen.
dies, right? Like,
Yeah, I have. Yeah, yeah, and opioid deaths are stealing a significant portion of like yeah, when they
because
equate it to.
it's
Yeah, and I've
actually,
seen that graph. Yeah, that's available on the government website. It's really interesting. And COVID deaths are somewhere like at the bottom, because the majority of people that passed away from COVID, again, tragic. Like, but talking about it in a statistics way, where we should be basing policies on statistics and not policies based on like if people are scared or
yeah.
um, people can do their own risk assessments and live their life the way that they
Yeah,
want to live it that way. I think,
because I
but
think opioid deaths or drug overdose deaths have actually
yeah.
lowered our expected life expectancy.
Yeah, they were saying that it was highest. I was listening to the radio today, which isn't a great source for me to cite things from. Um, but it was talking about how like 30 to 39-year-olds, the most opioid deaths occurred in that age group. And that's just like, that's so bonkers. That's my age group. Like, I just think about that and how, like, that's just so tragic. You know, we have a certain life expectancy.
These people have kids.
These people have kids, you know, and they have so much, I think, ahead of them, right? Like so much life ahead of them, so many opportunities to contribute to society in a healthy way,
Well,
if we put some resources in place for them. But you know, yeah,
and you know, and that brings up something that I've thought about, that has actually been, I think, like, you know, if you're looking for a positive benefit to the pandemic, I think what it's done is for people that are, it's opened up a whole different understanding of the value of mental health, right? Because when
yeah,
everything is going tickety boo, you know, we can just ignore the fact that our friend's neighbor's brother passed away from a drug overdose, right?
yeah,
But this, um, what happened with the pandemic is that suddenly that came closer, right? Because
hmm,
the increase in deaths, suddenly we actually had to confront it a little bit. And I think it's brought some needed attention to the issues of mental health and and drug overdose, and that it's actually something that we need to start paying attention to. So I think, you
yeah.
know, however you can say it, it's brought some positive attention to that issue.
Yeah, yeah, and I hope something's done about that.
Yeah,
I hope that our governments put in, you know, more resources or time, like retaining workers in those fields.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
so yeah, that would be
So
great.
have you got anything else that you had
Oh,
some?
yeah. Nothing too much. Oh, yeah. Here's something. Okay, so we kind of talk about lockdowns
Yes.
and the benefits of those. And you know, fair enough. The fact that we really didn't have this information prior to doing lockdowns, we
Yeah.
didn't know what the outcome would really be. But the National Post did an article referencing a John Hopkins study that was recently done about lockdowns, and lockdowns apparently only reduced COVID deaths by 0.2%, um, which is like which is just crazy to me. So we did lockdowns, you know, focusing on COVID and focusing on deaths, and they didn't really work that well. And
No.
if you go into the National Post and you look this study up, it actually breaks down where like what areas were at higher risk. So like I think bars and nightclubs were actually at higher risk for transmitting COVID, but you know restaurants and things like weren't really.
Really?
Gyms
Well,
weren't really. So you can go on there and see the breakdown of things that you know should have probably stayed closed or been closed, or at least lowered in capacity, like had capacity limits in place.
that means we could have still gone to restaurants. It means we could have still gone to watch our kids play sports.
Yeah, and it means you could have still gone to the gym and like looked after your mental health and your physical health that would have benefited you at staying healthy if you were to contract COVID. You know,
Okay.
so I think hindsight 2020, it's good that we have this information now, but it doesn't really seem like we're doing too much about having
Yes.
this good
Yeah.
new information, you
Oh,
know?
I know. Yeah.
So it's kind of it's a little bit frustrating to see.
Yes, so just a reminder, if you're watching, I'd love to see a comment and just to make sure that that's working and I haven't, you know, messed something up. So feel free to comment. I think if you like, if you're watching on Facebook Live, I know that I think I have it set up so that I'm on YouTube. I see a little check mark by my YouTube symbol up there. So see if that works.
I'm like looking over the screen right now, but
No, I don't think you can. I
I can't
think it's
see
just me.
anything. I just see
I'm
you.
Yeah, I'm in the StreamYard studio.
Lovely, lovely.
Yeah. So my the little banner going across the bottom says, "How can we get out of this?" So what would you say to those people who are, and it's a natural reaction. Like we've had 2 years of restrictions and lockdowns, and I know for myself, after that first 3 months, and you know when we started sort of getting permission to go places a little,
Hmm.
I was like, I'm content at home.
Yeah.
I was surprised at how at that in me, like because I'm
Hmm.
an extrovert, and so now I'm seeing a lot of people as governments are slowly announcing the end of restrictions. There's a lot of people just absolutely certain that the government is trying to kill them, or that they're trying to kill
Right.
their kids, or
Yeah.
how dare you say my kid doesn't need to wear a mask because, like in school. How do you respond to that? Like, what would you advise parents to do?
I would advise parents to maybe like dig a little bit deeper into the numbers. Um, I have a baby, so I know that everyone wants the best for their child, and the intent is to make sure that your child is safe and healthy
Yeah.
and is going to be okay.
Yeah.
So I think that that fear comes from a good place, and I think that we're kind of at a point in this pandemic where Saskatchewan and Alberta are doing this, but lifting restrictions, and I think we're kind of at this place where people can do their own risk assessments. If you're comfy to stay at home and that's where you feel safe right now, stay at home. Like that's where you feel safe. That's okay. If you still want to wear a mask out in public, wear a mask out in public. Like if that's what makes you feel secure. But I think at the same time, like looking up the statistics, like looking up peer-reviewed studies, especially where we are now, the science changes as we go forward in the pandemic because we're facing new variants and it's a completely different situation, right? And so we're just at a different place, and so keeping up with the science, I think is important.
And maybe to be a little bit careful of the headlines, because sometimes you read a
Yeah,
headline and it's like, oh my goodness, that's terrifying. And realizing that sometimes it's just something that was written really quickly with a catchy headline. And it's like, you need to actually look at other stuff.
yeah. I think that the mainstream media has had a job these last few years, and I think it was to make sure that people were remaining we're kind of doing things in line with the science that we had, staying inside, the benefit is for the benefit of individuals. But I think now we kind of have to question a little bit about what we're seeing in the media, I think. And it's really interesting now because, even now you see in the media, oh, now we're talking about natural immunity. That was never in the conversation prior to Omicron. And
I
like
know.
us being kind of phased into this new part of the pandemic where we're kind of in an endemic now. You see us talking about natural immunity. You see headlines like, oh, we're going to have to learn to live with the virus. Bonnie Henry being, oh, if you haven't had it, you've been exposed to it. Just kind of things that are starting to, I feel like, phase us into that next step of we're going to start lifting things a little bit more. And we already see that in Saskatchewan and Alberta, right? And even PEI is starting to do that. So yeah, I think just being careful and maybe don't get your sources, like what you're going to do for you and your family, necessarily from the mainstream media. Unless they're referencing like peer reviewed studies and things like that. Like look into it. Unless we're like a virologist or an immunologist, if we're just really being honest, we're doing our own research,
And I think, like, and just talking about Dr. Bonnie Henry, like she's well loved in BC, and
Mm.
and so I mean the announcement today about anybody, what was the announcement today?
Regulated.
Any regulated industry had to be vaccinated. It's like
Yeah.
that just seemed so political to me.
Yeah.
However, and I really strongly disagree with that. However, um, if you look at the gist of what she has been saying, like she talks a lot about essentially a low risk for different age groups, and she talks about living our lives as normally as possible. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think like even that should be enough. And yeah, I think what you're saying though about that worry and that concern comes from a good space, and people are wanting, and we all, like all of us who are parents or who had I mean my kids are grown, so but
Right.
I get that, like we worry, right? And we don't want to feel that guilt.
Yeah.
um but like you were saying, that there are other risks for not,
Yeah.
if we stay at home only, and that's not a good thing either for our kids.
Yeah, and I think we're just at a point in the pandemic where we can weigh that ourselves,
Mhm.
where it needs to phase from a political thing to a personal responsibility thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I think we're just at that point, and the fact that we have provinces doing that, and we're not doing that in BC. In fact, we're going in the opposite direction in BC, where we're continuing to put in mandates and new mandates. I just think I think we kind of need to line up and
Take a
just
pill.
yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah. Well, we have the pill form now, so I think if our concern is saving people, which it should be, there's a lot of options for that now.
Yeah.
and our healthcare system is going to be in a better place when our hospitalizations start going down. Not that it was in a great place before the pandemic. Like, our healthcare system was already running over capacity prior to the
Yes.
healthcare system, and then we fired a whole lot of healthcare
Oh,
workers.
good grief.
Yeah, I think it was 6,000 in BC. Like, they came out with the numbers a while ago. It was like
Yeah,
6,000,
it
which
was
is
terrible.
pretty significant for an already like overcapacity system and understaffed system. And then what's been done to support healthcare, provincially? I think that that's just going to remain one of like the great disappointments of the pandemic. We didn't do anything this pandemic that we've done in prior pandemics. We didn't open temp hospitals. We didn't hire civilian workers. What about hazard pay for healthcare workers? All these things that we didn't do. We didn't do anything to retain, nurses and doctors, and we see just nurses being so burnt out and just quitting because all they got was a pizza party. So I just think that we have done a great disservice to our healthcare system throughout this entire thing, and I have yet to see really anything that the government's done to improve that still.
And I think one reason that they don't, and I know that I wanted to have it about half an hour, so we
Oh
can,
yes, an hour. I just
I'll try to be done. I know, but that's a hard, so we'll go just a little tiny bit longer. Reforming our healthcare system is something that we have resisted so much because we're always thinking, oh no, if we reform it, we're going to become like the American system. And it's like, no. There are other options and we can do things better because I don't have any stats here, but I've read stuff that, we could, by keeping single payer, like, the taxpayer pays for, like the government, like through the government, we pay for everybody's healthcare. But there are so many things that we could improve there. And I really think that the pandemic and our lack, like somebody was saying, like if you think about it, like in BC, the fact that 100 extra people in ICU beds would cripple our healthcare system is shocking.
Yeah,
Like that's basically, if there was a major industrial accident, that we'd be in trouble.
for sure.
Or like a major, like an earthquake
Mm-hmm.
or mainland, or like, what are we thinking?
Yeah,
Like,
it's pretty significant. Like our healthcare issue is a pretty significant issue. I would like to see more politicians discuss this
I
and
know they
maybe
always
come up with some different solutions, because I think that that is something, and now that we have this new virus too that's not going away, we have to account for this now, especially every winter when it's flu season and everything season, right? When we're all huddled indoors and things just spread more. This is something that's going to
and
continue.
that brings up ventilation.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Which we've ignored. And do you know
Yeah.
the BC? I just like, BC Children's Hospital yesterday tweeted out that COVID was spread by droplets.
Interesting. Is it not airborne though?
It's airborne.
Right.
For the first few months, we thought it might be droplets.
Right.
And then we figured out, no, it wasn't. It was actually aerosols.
Yeah.
And yet here we have BC Children's Hospital saying that it's droplets. And it's like, somebody, like, there was some discussion about this that I was following on Twitter, and they were saying, like, why the heck would they say something that was so blatantly false? And it's
Right.
somebody was saying that, well, it's because they don't want to have to pay for the in changes to the ventilation system.
Interesting. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, it's really strange. I think if anything I've learned through this entire pandemic is that corporations are just kind of out there a little bit for themselves. And as much as we love to say it's about public health, and on an individual, like, I'm just a citizen of this country, I love to believe, like, I love to look at that and be like, yeah, it's about our community, and like, it's about our public health, because I can get behind that. But the more you look into the organizations and the people really saying these things, you're like, oh, okay, you're really benefiting from this a little bit too. And I think it's striking that balance of, when are people just benefiting from it, and when are we actually, following public health and trying to make our community better? Because public health is all encompassing. It's not just COVID, and we can't keep saying, every bad consequence that comes from the mandates is just collateral damage because we're so hyper focused on COVID.
Mhm.
When we're now having more damage because of the mandates than we are protecting people, looking at this John Hopkins study and lockdowns and the amount
Mhm.
of people that they've saved,
Yeah.
0.2%. When we're doing a lot more damage to people than we are doing good, I think that we need to reevaluate and put some different things in place. And yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I know that there has been some media attention to that collateral damage of lockdowns and restrictions.
Yeah. Mhm.
There's been a bit, but not nearly enough.
Yeah.
And I really hope that, like, because us citizens, like I was looking up, I was writing my last column on this about the role of the media, and they're supposed to hold our government to account in between elections. That's their role.
Yeah.
And um, and in a pandemic, they certainly have that extra role of being a bit of trying to take a lead role in helping to inform people and make sure that to bring out the message, right? But
Mhm.
it seems that they forgot their role was to critique.
Yeah.
And even though there were occasional articles about it, but not enough. And
Yeah. And I think that these larger media companies too, when they get donations from like the federal government, I think that I don't think that that should be allowed.
no,
I think that that causes a lot of, just room for bias,
yeah,
especially when it's like $600 million, right, over a period of 5 years from the
yeah.
federal government.
And I
I
feel bad because I've long defended legacy media and their
Yeah.
role. But I mean, I just have not, especially in the last few weeks, I've not been impressed.
Yeah, I found that out kinda earlier on in the pandemic. I know we spoke about this a little bit, but I found that out because I saw, like, some of the protests going on earlier on in the pandemic,
Yes.
and they were nothing that the media said that they were. Like, just kinda flat out misinformation, let's call it. Just flat out
Okay.
misinformation, um, which was really disappointing, but, you look into it and you just see, oh, like, they do kinda have a role through this pandemic and, they are pushing a certain narrative, and I think that, to
But
not understand that is a smidge ignorant. If you look at you kinda need to look into it a little bit more, which again, I think is why you should not be sourcing your information from mainstream media or legacy media. You should be looking into it yourself and looking
yeah,
into it from, actual statistics and peer reviewed studies and stuff like that rather than CTV or global.
yeah. All
Yeah.
right. Okay. So to wrap
Mhm.
it up, you would say for those people that are scared about the restrictions coming
Yeah.
off, and kids going to school maybe without masks eventually here in BC, uh,
Mhm.
you would again your what would your advice be if somebody's watching this for advice?
I think just do your own risk assessment. I don't think anybody should be attacking anybody for like their personal health choices. If you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. If you want to mask your kid or your kid wants to wear a mask, like let your kid wear a mask if your kid wants to wear a mask. But I think that we should all be allowed to do our own risk assessment at this time in the pandemic, and one should not be judging the other based on their decisions and how comfortable that they are
Yeah.
with taking certain risks.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. I've got one comment. I think he's okay if I show it.
Oh, I can't see.
I Can you see it now?
Oh, I hate conspiracy theories, but I hate that so many are coming true.
I know.
Same. I feel this so
Hey.
much. I, at the beginning of the pandemic, were so critical of people like saying things. And then it was like every 6 months, things just started
I know.
coming
And you're just like,
true a bit.
no.
Yeah,
I
and I was like,
know.
I don't want to be on this side of things. But it's hard not to be when you just see things happening.
But I think if you think about it, it's it's not really anything new, right?
No.
Like the fact that our media isn't like I think we've been like to think that because the media is a product of people, right? It's just
Yeah.
like expecting every politician to be completely honest all the time. Like
Yeah.
none of us are, right?
No.
Not a single one of us is always honest all the time.
Yeah.
And it's like expecting every journalist to do an excellent job every time. We can't expect that. And
Yeah.
I think probably what has happened is that it's like, yeah, okay, we need to maybe do a readjustment here in our own expectations and
Yeah.
to maybe demand a bit more and a bit better.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right.
It was fun.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kim,
Thanks.
for coming on. And I have to ask you because you are, well informed and well able to speak.
Thanks.
Are we going to see you? Are we going to see you running for office at some point?
No, probably not. Nope. I am just not. I am too afraid to get into politics. I mean, other than my own opinions based on like what I like to look up and get really passionate about, I think that would be a bad
Okay.
move.
All right. Well, I've been told that women have to be asked 11 times before they will actually say
Oh
yes.
goodness! So it's the pressure that gets every woman in because she's just tired of being asked. And she's like, all right, fine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is your first time.
Oh, great. Only 10 more.
Only 10 more.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Kim. And
Thanks. That was fun.
all right. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And we'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.